break, and we will be moving into breakout sessions in this room, a conference room, and outside, and I'll give additional directions for that after the panel wraps up. I also want to let you know that after our breakout session, we're going to have a very special talk with Michael Fergal, who is the Vice President for Educational Programming and Services at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and a former colleague of mine at PBS. There's Michael. So this is like a reunion for a lot of us here today. So now I will introduce our moderator, Tamara Gould. In addition to being a filmmaker, Tamara is the Senior Vice President of National Production and Strategic Partnerships at the independent television service known as ITVS. She directs multiple initiatives and campaigns in her current role, including Women and Girls Lead Public Broadcasting Initiative. She's developed Women and Girls Lead Global, a multi-year public-private partnership with USAID, the Ford Foundation, and CARE, as well as Diverse Muslim Voices Media Exchange, a documentary initiative to foster and enhance greater understanding of the Muslim world, supported by private philanthropic partners. You can read more about Tamara and all our guests in the biographies that are on your seats, the handouts. And now I will turn the microphone over to Tamara, and we will have our first round of panelists. That's Eliza Licht from POV, Rich Homberg from Detroit Public Television, and Felicia Pride of Pride Collaborative. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michonne, and thank you guys all for joining us. Really, we have an embarrassment of riches. We've organized the day into speed dating, speed rounds. So we'll have this panel, then we'll do a quick switch out and have a couple more panelists come, because really what we wanted to do with many of you in the room is make this as useful and productive as possible, so that you come away from this session really understanding what you can do with your film before, during, and after you've made it, to really reach and connect with audiences. But before we do that, just a little bit of background. First, a huge thank you to Michonne for organizing us all today. Yes. Thank you to AFI Docs for allowing us to bring the session, and thank you to our wonderful partners, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, who have sponsored the session today. We are delighted to have the opportunity to be here. As you heard from Michonne, there will be breakout sessions, and a couple folks who are not on the panel, and I don't see them in the room, but Pat after Heidi, who directs the Center for Social Media and also organizes the Media That Matters engagement conference, will be leading a breakout session also. So please avail yourself of that, as well as Michael Fergal, which you heard earlier. And I hope that you guys are coming from the Catalyst screening of Homestretch, which is a film that is part of the American Graduate Initiative and will be broadcasting on Independent Lens in spring 2015. So I hope you guys had a chance to check that out this morning to see kind of engagement in action. I would call that engagement as it's, as it's happening. It's kind of happening right now. Today's session is being streamed live, so hi, Dad. I'm really not kidding. Feel free. Feel free also, those of you who are so inclined, you can tweet your comments during the session to use hashtag AFIDocs. The Twitter handle is @AFIDocs as well, and I think it'll come up on the screen so you can see it if, like me, you need a few reminders. Let us turn our attention to the first round of our gurus. With us is Eliza Licht on the far right, who is the Vice President for Community Engagement and Education at POV, which I assume all of you in the room know, but for any of you who don't, it's a documentary series on public broadcasting. It's won too many Emmys to count, and it has been with us for 25.
We're actually starting our 27th season on Monday.
27th season on PBS, and so Eliza, we're delighted to have you with us. Felicia Pride, who is a writer and a producer and the founder of the Pride Collaborative, and has a lot to share with us about engagement and also education. And Rich Homberg, who is president and CEO of Detroit Public Television, And I've asked Rich to kind of be my wingman and sit up here if he's going to be on both panels, mostly because he really represents, at the heart of public broadcasting, in addition to filmmakers, are our stations. And so he really has the station perspective, which is how can stations connect with filmmakers. And so I thought it would be great to tap Rich. Plus, he's our token male, and I figured we would just allow him to, be up here. So let's jump in. I want to do this informally, and I also want to leave room for all of you guys to jump in and ask questions. So there will be time for questions at the end of the session. But if there's something you're just dying to ask or something that I'm not getting at, please just let us know. Eliza, let's start with you. So POV has really been on the vanguard of creating engagement tools. What do you see what do you see in terms of the opportunities for engagement that weren't even possible 8 years ago or even 3 years ago?
Sure. I'll go back further than that. I started at POV 13 years ago, and it was a very different world, as all of you know, at that point in time. It was before YouTube, and it was before... So the vast majority of filmmakers that I was meeting were coming in kind of not understanding even what this, at that point, the word that we were using was outreach. What is outreach? What does that mean? And they understood education in terms of educational distribution, but not really this larger idea of engagement and partnering up with different community organizations. So fast forward, I would say very dramatically in the past 3 years, there's been this shift of people really getting it, particularly in the U.S. It's a little bit different with some of our foreign filmmakers, but here in the U.S., people are really understanding what this engagement is, why it's so important. I think a lot of funders have come and are backing it, and this is outside. I think that PBS and CP and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting always got it, and POV and ITVS and many different organizations always were working in this space, but now it's expanded, which is really exciting. What it means for me is every film is a different puzzle. So for POV, just a little background, all of our films, and we've been doing this since I started, we have community engagement and education campaigns, meaning that every film that's on POV has a number of resources that we create so that we can get it into communities and classrooms across the country. So that's a discussion guide that has discussion questions and background information that's really created for community organizers. Then we create a lesson plan that's, depending on the film, either high school, sometimes it skews really old, but it can go as young as middle school. And we'll create these that are standards-based so that they can be used in classrooms. And a reading list, just to learn more about that. We also set up free screenings as part of our mission, is that we have these screenings available for different public institutions to use. So that's always been our MO. And then recently, we meet with the filmmakers early on. We partner with them and find out what they're doing. And more this year in particular, people are coming with full campaigns already in place, which is really great. And so what my job is to figure out, okay, that's great. You have this guide. This guide is great. I'm going to just double check it. We're going to package it for PBS a little bit, but we're going to give you the credit. It's great you already have this. We now have additional resources to figure out something else, maybe find a different audience that we can go after. And target in a different way and get even deeper. So, it's a completely different world in really great ways, but.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we'll come back. We're going to come back to some specifics and also look at some clips and specific examples from POV in a minute. But Felicia, let me turn to you. You've been working on developing tools for engagement for a while. What tools and transmedia strategies are you seeing that are sort of game changers and that are really making the difference on the engagement front for films?
Do I need the mic? I definitely think it's probably from a strategies approach. The tools will change, but if you understand what a strategy could look like or what your strategy should be and actually have a strategy, I love the fact to hear about these filmmakers because I meet many filmmakers who come too late to me or are thinking about engagement and outreach too late in the game. I always encourage filmmakers to think about it pre-production and to actually budget for outreach and engagement. A lot of the budget goes to production, but thinking about budgeting for outreach and engagement. So transmedia can be an interesting, I look at it, it's a approach to storytelling where you tell different parts of the story over different platforms. So basically it's about complementing, not duplicating. I'm very interested in transmedia from a theoretical framework, from a framework on how we can use some of the elements of transmedia to engage audiences. One of the ones that I think could really help filmmakers is the idea of building the story world. In transmedia storytelling, if you think about any Game of Thrones fans in here, no? Okay, so Game of Thrones, very, very intense and complicated world that this author has built with rules and characters and themes and that sort of thing. So thinking from a doc filmmaking standpoint, really thinking about the world that your story lives in. So not thinking so much discretely about that story that you're telling in that 70 minutes or whatever the case is, but thinking more broadly about all the people, the places, the locations, the objects, the whatever the case is, to really build out and map the story world, because that'll help you do a couple things. Number one, develop additional content that can be used to engage audiences, and think about the types of partners and even audiences that might be interested, because you're able to see this full world more holistically. So that's one tool from transmedia that I think can be helpful. Another is this idea of story research and development. So within transmedia, we are really thinking about how story can be developed very much like software is developed, or very much like the manufacturing process, where story may not actually be finished. And the many doc filmmakers know that the story is not done, right? We told one piece of it, but there's still others to tell. And so looking at this process as iterative, looking at this process is where you could bring in other players, possibly your audience, to help you develop the story, and help you to think about it through production as well as distribution. But really think of it as not being done, as something that you're testing and improving as you go along. So maybe before you spend all the money and release this wonderful 90-minute doc, you're looking at short 2-minute clips, you're testing them, you're seeing what's working, et cetera.
So Felicia, what I'm hearing you say is that engagement is no longer something you think of when you're done with your film. It's something that you think of as you're thinking about your film, what it's going to be and what you want to do with your film.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that filmmakers sometimes are, uncomfortable with the idea of marketing their film. But we all have the goal of, we want people to actually see it. So, and I think we need to be honest with ourselves about that. And I think that when you think of it as engagement, and you think about it from day one as part of your pre-production and production process, I think that that could be really helpful instead of thinking of it as a separate entity on its own.
So Rich, let's bring it to you. At what point, so for you at a station, how can filmmakers come to you with their film, and what is the right time for you so that you can do the kind of engagement that Detroit has really been doing in these last years?
Well, obviously early, and really relentlessly. Sometimes I think we're in the business of using all the materials these folks have always created that we've thrown out, and now we're going, and now we're going to build engagement plans out of them, right? And so, can you hear me? Okay. Obviously early, and I think you should be met at the front door by someone who pretty much understands some of the issues you're driving, has a deep knowledge of what are the key issues in our community, and that should be an exchange. I think if you look at the active voice materials, there's some great materials out there that can give you an insight into how to walk into the station, what the station's expectation is. We're trying to get out of feeling like a fussy operation and more like a facilitative organization. So we've got lots of rules and standards. None of them are at all negotiable. Trust, transparency, clarity, a complete understanding that we don't really advocate for issues, we drive understanding. To be able to easily display those, but as advantages and opportunities to you. At the same time, there's lots of material out there. Understand walking into a station, what they're looking for, where they sit in the community, how you can be part of their success, and change that dialogue from, I've got a film, we need to own it or it doesn't air, to how do we make this happen together? How do we have a conversation with the community? How does this fit into your station? Just a stronger dialogue.
No, that's great. So this next round of questions, I really want to break it down for you guys and allow our panelists to give you some really concrete examples. So Eliza, let's talk about American Promise and Brooklyn Castle, two films that aired on POV that were also part of the American Graduate Initiative, which is led by CPB and public media partners across the system on television and on radio, to highlight the importance of high school graduation. Can you talk with us about those two films and about how those fit into a campaign and what kind of impact you had?
Sure, absolutely, my pleasure. But before I do, I think I want to show you guys some clips in 1 second, Michonne, but because they are what makes this work possible, and the clips are really powerful. It's really these stories. So the trailers speak more to the films than I will. So let's go.
We are ITVS from Brooklyn, New York. Yeah, Williamsburg. We crush our opponents in chess, take all the trophies home.
It started with this little group of kids. We got a couple of boards, and they came in and started playing, and we decided that we would take a try going to the Nationals because it would be a great experience for the children from 318 to travel to another state to enter a chess competition. And we won. Then you win again. This goes on for 10 years. We're still winning.
My mom and dad came to the U.S. because they want to have a better life for me. Most of my family are like housemaids, gardeners, painters.
I'm playing in Girls Nationals because I want to win the scholarship. It's going to help my mom a lot because she can't afford to pay for college.
They came to the United States because of the American dream. Look at all these medals.
I'm very proud of you.
Some people compare us to the Yankees of chess because we've won so much, so it makes the disappointments harsher. How'd you do, Rochelle?
The smallest hint of failure, you don't want to have to face that.
We just got caught $250,000. It would be a shame if, because of some corrupt bankers ruining the economy, that our kids couldn't go on the trips.
As your school president, my primary goal is to restore money that was lost in the budget cuts.
In the chess room, I'm probably almost to last place. Hey, at least I'm not last.
What big game tomorrow? It's all on you.
Yeah, that really helps a lot.
I'm not here to get second. I don't know about you, I'm not here to get no second. Howdy, buddy.
Let's ride. One.
You could easily become the first African-American female to become a master.
I can really do this. I believe in my dream.
In some schools, if you're on the chess team, you're this pariah which no one wants anything to do with you. In 318, the geeks, they are the athletes.
I'm gonna start off as a lawyer, then to district attorney, then to attorney general, and then to governor. From governor to senator, from senator to president.
Yeah?
Tell me about your girlfriend.
I don't have a girlfriend. You're just shy. I'm not shy.
Idris is extremely bright.
Shayon's creativity is exceptional.
What we teach adults is to teach them they have a voice.
It's my best school and I love it there. I would like to be a professional basketball player when I grow up.
I want Shayon to be comfortable around white folks because I think even at this point, I am not comfortable around white folks.
How do you feel about being one of the few black kids there? Is that ever an issue?
No, it's never an issue.
Good try, Idris!
Dalton will open doors for him for the rest of his life. You see the inauguration? At one point, I was thinking what we're doing could pay off in something like this. Not that I want you to be the president of the United States.
I'm not going really good in school. I get really frustrated. my basketball team, they said, "Oh, you talk like a white boy."
They told us that our son is a hard-to-manage guy. They don't know him.
There's a cultural disconnect between independent schools and African-American boys, and the question is why?
I hate school. It's bad. It's hard. The problem is focusing on class.
After you leave Dalton, where do you go?
I really don't want to leave.
I don't think it was, frankly, a good match for him.
I'd be better off if I was white. Isn't that true?
This is unacceptable.
Sit up!
It's laziness.
Something is wrong with my child.
People would say, wow, you're controlling his entire life. But I think we weren't controlling enough.
Dad is not giving up on you. I'm hard because I want you to be a better man than I am.
I think I'm ready for college.
I can't take life for granted.
It feels so right.
Just calling my name. There's nothing you can't do in this world. We back you up all the way.
The Triumph Award goes to Shay Summers. This is just the beginning.
Even through all the struggles, I feel like I'm going places.
You should be proud.
Thanks. What I love about those two films is that they're success stories, tempered success stories, but success stories. And we were very lucky in the fact that they both were in the same season. So whenever we have films that that build on each other and they're in the same season, we're able to really build out robust campaigns around them. And I think this was also appealing to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting that came in and really helped us to support a big campaign around both of these films. And it included station grants. So we gave out $150,000 of station grants to 17 different stations to work with 3 primary audiences that we chose. One was students themselves, the other was parents and caretakers, and the third was educators. And both films had themes that really spoke to all 3 of these audiences, so that was really helpful for us. And American Promise in particular came in with a really big campaign behind it already, and I think that's what I was talking about earlier. So it was great. There were all of these really fantastic resources that were already created. So what we did, we came in, met with them, thought about it, strategized, what can we do, how can we change this, how can we package it, how can we get it out to additional audiences. And public television stations were really helpful in that regard. Detroit Public Television, you did a vignette on a local chess club, and that aired. And so that was one big part of it. So it was creating these additional resources for these additional target audiences, and then also just getting it out to our partners. So as far as what happened, we had over 200 events that were held across the country. Over 17,000 attendees were there. But we also created these really in-depth surveys to find out what kind of impact they were having. And 82% reported that the event fostered a greater understanding of the issues presented. 71% believed that the event raised the community profile. But additionally, 70% of participants reported that the issue of black male achievement, they felt it was more important than ever, and they wanted to do something. Furthermore, we actually attracted, it wasn't a group that we were necessarily going after in the first place, but many policymakers became really interested in this issue and in these films. And so we had a couple high-profile policy events. One was right here in D.C. With RADA Films, and Picture Motion was involved in it too, and you'll hear from Heidi a little bit later. But we had a screening on the Hill, and the filmmakers were there, and also David Johns, who's the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. And it was a really important conversation that we had that spurred many more partnerships and discussions that then continue to grow. I mean, we're going to continue to work on this. And also in New York, when the new administration came on, there was something called Talking Transition. And basically, both films and both filmmakers were invited to come and talk to whoever was going to be coming into the new administration in New York City. So we had a full day. It was called POV Sunday, and both of these films were there. So,
Thank you so much, Eliza. And so what would, and then I want to turn it over to you, Felicia, to talk a little bit about your experience with Slavery by Another Name. But before I do that, I just had a follow-up question. What do you think the takeaway of these filmmakers in the room should be from those clips that you saw? Is it, make an amazing film? Is it, go into it already thinking about who the stakeholders? What is the takeaway?
Yes, both of those. No, obviously you need a great story. You need to have a great film and a great story, and that's the foundation upon which everything else is going to come. So, yes. Also, though, as Felicia said, bring in your partners as early as possible. So if you have a great trailer, and actually with American Promise, they were really great. They did that so well, and we actually were in early on that one, which was exciting for us. So we were able to be on these early funding conversations and strategy sessions. So as soon as you have something to show the audiences that you ultimately are trying to reach, bring them, invite them in, and show them sneak previews. Let them be a part of it and feel some ownership over it, and that's how you're really going to build a coalition. And
you can feel good because that film took 14 years to make. Yeah. So for any of you in the room, you're going to have to feel like yours is coming along more quickly. So good. So Felicia, tell us about your experiences building partners and doing deep engagement around Slavery by Another Name. And you're also going to talk with us about Alice Walker, Beauty and Truth, another film that you've worked on. So talk to us about those.
Yeah, so I'll probably focus on Slavery. Slavery by Another Name is a documentary produced by Twin Cities Public Television that was based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Slavery by Another Name by Douglas A. Blackman. And so we actually have a clip that I'll show so you have sort of an idea of what the film is about. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of our education and outreach strategies.
For a period of nearly 80 years between the Civil War and World War II, black Southerners were no longer slaves, but they were not yet free.
What happened in that period of time was so much more terrible than anything most Americans recognize or understand today.
In one of the most shameful chapters of American history, generations of black Southerners were forced to labor against their will.
Free black people could be just picked up and put in jail. The sheriff department could sell people to corporations and coal mines.
He locked me up for 3 days. And after that, he said, if I don't go to work, he'll put me in the river down there.
People's lives were truly stolen from them. Their freedom was taken away.
All the southern states use the criminal justice system to put African Americans back into a position as close to slavery as they possibly could.
These were real people who were deemed to be of no value. Maybe now, through the telling of this history, these individuals can receive some measure of justice.
So the film challenges one of our most cherished assumptions that slavery ended in this country with the Emancipation Proclamation. So it looks at systems of forced labor that happened after Emancipation Proclamation up until about World War II. And so it's a heavy subject. It's a subject also that we found that a lot of people were unfamiliar with, a lot of teachers were unfamiliar with, therefore a lot of students were unfamiliar with. So this film, which also received funding from CPB, so we're very grateful for that, it was important to have a strong education component. So Pride Collaborative, which I run, we were the education partner and outreach partner for this film. And so when we thought about the development of these materials, we really wanted it to be asset-based and media-rich. And this is something for filmmakers who, if you're not able to, hire an education partner or bring on an education partner, think about the assets that you have from your film that you can make available to educators. So we had images from Library of Congress that were, we had permission to use that we made available as assets. We also, a lot of things that hit the cutting room floor, we turned into short videos. We really focused on producing a very strong video collection. So we have videos of B-rolls of some of the videos, I should say, of some of the scholars speaking. We also have digital stories. We partnered with StoryCorps to record audio oral histories of some of the descendants, and then we paired those oral histories with images and footages for the film to create these digital stories. We also went and asked for rights for the audio version of the book. So we have audio excerpts from the actual book that we also used as assets, which we got free permission to do that. So we built basically a library of more than 80 videos that I feel like is really the foundation of our education materials, because it's education both in traditional sense and non-traditional sense. So those adults who say, why don't I know about this history? Let me learn more about the Black codes, can do it on their own. But also we were able to use them as the foundation of our curriculum materials. So that was something that we did that was very strong, that I feel filmmakers can think about. What assets that you have can you use? We also, the film was definitely screened and continues to be screened by individuals who just sort of gather people. So we had a really strong community screening aspect to the film. Of course, we created a community guide, and now that the film is actually going to be translated into 3 languages, Haitian Creole, Spanish, and Portuguese, as well as the community guide is going to be translated as well in order to think about the international impact of this history. So, and the film originally broadcast in 2012, and one thing that I also recognize can be difficult for filmmakers, but maybe also an opportunity, is that sometimes films have lives that keep going. And if you're able to think about the ways to help them to keep going, or if you're able to build a strategy that's more long tail versus just about broadcast, you may find additional opportunities available. We also then we really wanted to focus on equipping teachers with both the comfort and the knowledge to bring this history into the classroom. So we were like, what can we do? So we developed these traveling digital storytelling workshops where we taught teachers how to develop digital stories using mobile devices. And we actually used content from the film. They used content from the film and content from our assets to create these digital stories. And we would partner in the different cities we partnered with ITVS in San Francisco. We would partner with public media stations. We would partner with schools, museums, other community institutions to have these trainings. And then we developed videos based on those trainings for, of course, those educators who we could not reach. So that was really, really strong. And now we're happy to say that we recently received funding from Open Society's Campaign for Black Male Achievement, and we're developing a curriculum that's aimed at Black and Latino male students. And we already have established partnerships with the Expanded Success Initiative and COSBAC to, after the curriculum is finished, to bring that to do teacher trainings with their educators. And the curriculum has a very strong digital storytelling core as well, where these young men will be creating their own digital stories.
And so I think another takeaway from that incredible work is it may take you 14 years to make the film, and then your outreach is never going to end. So I just want you to understand what you're. No, but Felicia has such a great range of experience, and I do want to remind you that there are going to be breakout sessions, so you'll have a chance to really, drill down and really get that kind of, detail that I know you're all, or many of you, are wanting. And we are going to talk about funding, which you raised, because I'm sure that's on all of your minds. But before we turn it there, Rich, I wanted to just talk to you about, you said in your earlier remark, you're seeing public television stations turn into facilitators. Right. So here you are, you have these incredible films, you have these tools and these transmedia platforms. How does the station fit in the best way? How do you see, what have you done? Because you've really been on the cutting edge in Detroit. Tell us about some work that you guys have been doing.
Well, I guess I always think while you're off for your 3 to 14 years making a film, what should we be doing in the meantime, right? So I joined Detroit. I ran the all-news station Detroit for 12 years, and I learned a lot about the city and got very invested in the city. And eventually I thought, boy, this would be a great second career running the public television station. So I quit to take the job at Detroit Public Television. The head of the NAACP says to me, what did you do? You had a good job. Why did you take the public television's over, Rich? Hester Wheeler, great man, works for Wayne County today, and a good friend. And Shirley Stancato, who runs New Detroit, said, well, it's kind of over, but you've always been good to our people. Can you imagine a more left-handed compliment than you've always been good to our people? Like, you let us in your living room at one point, right? And I said, Hester, Shirley, I took this job for a reason. I said, there's a lot more there. Give us some time. And so then I calling into the station and trying to understand it, and I started to look at our national and our local content. For 30 plus years, we produced a show called American Black Journal. Started as a show called literally Colored People's Time in the 60s, hard to believe. It was a mediocre, once-a-week public affairs show. And I started to look at the national schedule and what was out there, and I saw real opportunities. Keep in mind, people say we have a very white audience, right? That would be a very common conception about public television. I would suggest that our audience is more defined by college graduation. We actually have a very tolerant, invested, heavy voting, philanthropic, education-loving, racism-hating audience. Look at the statistics. They're pretty white, so are a lot of college graduates. But at the same time, these are the people that are on the school board that don't yell at meetings, that get things done. These are the neighbors that tell you who to vote for, and they're pretty centrist. These are wonderful people, and they're really concerned about Detroit. And then you look at the national schedule and our local schedule and things we're doing. So we started to build a relationship with our African-American community. Started with Henry Louis Gates' big series, African American Lives 2. We actually premiered Ken Burns' National Park series at the Museum of African American History. Had a screening, bunch of community folks, bunch of funders. In the middle of the screening, someone stood up and said, the national parks were stolen from the American Indians and the African American community. Person sitting next to me said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Nothing. It's Detroit. That's the way Detroit works. People speak up. If you can't take it, don't move to Detroit." And then through a whole series of local initiatives, for years we produced the Sphinx competition, African American Hispanic kids playing the violin, classical music. We then announced Sphinx Con, a conference. We shot that and streamed it. We recently produced I think it'll end up being 4 half hours with Sphinx stars. If you look at the schedule, if you look at the 2 documentaries or the 3 we've looked at, every one of them becomes an opportunity to get your product and your films on our air, but for us to build relationships. Keep in mind, 95% of why you watch a station is based on content that I rent, I don't own, right? It's PBS content, it's ITVS content, it's POV. We don't own the content. We're not really, don't tell anybody, we're not really in the intellectual property business. We're in the relationship business. We're in the relationships with communities business. And so in our building, the gold standard in our building, at least I like to think the growing gold standard in our building is when you hear that dock behind you, like Brooklyn Castle, start to decode who's interested. Chess clubs, African American students and parents, school superintendents. Maybe we can get the MEA into that. We are in the business of decoding your content and helping you engage in the community. So along comes the whole, you want me to talk about Detropia?
Please, yeah.
So along the way, I'm there about 2 years, we go see one of the funders of Detropia. And again, it's like this odd left-handed conversation where the person's like, we're gonna launch Detropia at Sundance, and you're not gonna be there. Clearly, there was a little bit of an attitude of, we're gonna do this on our own, and it wasn't just built for public television. I knew the guy was slightly mad at me, but I didn't know why. But I knew that eventually it would end up on our air. And I said to our staff, Detropia just aired. If you just aired Detropia in Detroit, you could really stir up a hornet's nest. It's a tough film, right? That's years of understanding you've got to build up through The March, Power Broker, Freedom Riders, Freedom Summer Now, right? Brooklyn Castle. Every one of those films becomes a touch point with our community and this growing relationship with our community. We used, I don't know if you're familiar with the OV technology. Stephen Henderson, editorial page editor of the Free Press, does some work for us. He hosts American Black Journal now. That was a big change for us. He's part of our weekly public affairs show. We asked him to host a screening for the community. We wanted to use, Detropia for us was a good benchmark of how far have you come. Can you put that on your air, and when the phone rings the following day, say to that individual, come into the station. I want to show you what we've done, and I want you to tell us where we ought to get to. To me, what you should demand of your public television station is, you guys make documentaries, right? We make a few. We won a DuPont Columbia Award for Beyond the Light Switch. We produce a fair amount of intellectual property, a fair amount of content on our own. But the base of the station is this public media partnership we have and really understanding issues. So we should be ready for Grace Lee Boggs on the 30th, right? Grace Lee Boggs, a famous Detroiter, famous internationally around human rights. And we should be ready for that. That shouldn't take us a week to get ready for it. We should be able, when folks walk in, we should be able to decode that. Who needs to see it? How do we position it? What's its importance? So this week, it's a series of notes to find the best writer who can give us a couple of paragraphs on Grace Lee Boggs locally and turn that into part of our outreach using their materials. So what I would suggest you demand out of your station, to me, that's where we need to be. We are really partners, and I think what you're seeing in San Diego, St. Louis, Cleveland, certainly Minneapolis, certainly San Francisco, New York, Boston, these are stations that understand that a big part of our future is understanding our communities. This is not outreach. This is engagement. This is not a department. This is the general manager. And by the way, it's not the news department, your NPR station either. It's senior management on the street understanding issues.
Thank you so much, Rich. And right, this is the general manager. This isn't your, manager of outreach. This is from the top of the station saying, we believe in this. This is the role that the public station is playing to engage with the public. We're about to swap out for our next panel, but before I let you guys go, Felicia and Eliza, just from your experience, funders, where should filmmakers go for engagement? Where are you seeing promising opportunities? Last question.
Many places, like everywhere almost. There's the issue funders, but the standard outreach funders, I will say you should go to POV. We have a 4 filmmakers section that has resources and lists, like including funders. But Fledgling Fund is great when they actually have a deadline coming up in the next month or so. So if you're working on something right now, you should check that out. Ford, of course, Just Films. And who are the other huge ones?
Anything to add there?
You have the NEA and I look at it also from maybe you aren't necessarily directly funding engagement, but you're funding another component of your project, which could be thought of as like, okay, this is a new way to engage audiences. So NEA, NEH, and then also you can think about certain not large nonprofits who might be interested. So kind of like what she was saying with issues, but I don't know. I still feel like funding is a problem. I feel like it's not a sustainable model, which is another conversation I won't.
I think
and we'll talk on the next panel also about Kickstarter and crowdfunding. So we'll talk about that. Let me thank Felicia Pride and Eliza Licht so much for joining us. Thank you. And again, they'll be available at the breakout session, so we're not losing them. And we'll bring them back up for Q&A at the end of the next session as well. Let me invite up now Heidi Nell from Picture Motion, Chido from ITVS, and Lauren Prestileo from American Experience. Come sit. You can sit anywhere you're comfortable. We'll share the microphones. So let's jump right in. We obviously have a lot to build on what we've just heard, and a lot to hear from you guys. Heidi, let's start with you. So Heidi, you at Picture Motion, you've been involved with Move On campaigns, and you've been involved very much with Invisible War and the campaign around that. Talk to this audience about what does it take to get the kind of policy shift and cultural shift that many of the filmmakers in this room are looking for. Things are falling. How do you know that a film has been instrumental in making that happen? So talk to us about what do you need to make that kind of change happen?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, let me just start by saying, especially with the Invisible War, which I think a lot of people are looking to as something that's been a successful example of how to make impact in the political realm, but also culturally. I just want to say, the filmmakers that I work directly with on the Invisible War, they stop at nothing to get things done. And I think that's like sort of the first thing that I'll say about that. And even if I look at, the filmmakers of American Promise, another great example of people who stop at nothing to move the needle. And I remember, we're streaming this, but I'll share this one story to give an example. I remember very early on working with Amy Ziering, who I love and have loved the opportunity to work with her and have learned so much personally and professionally from her. We really wanted the White House to see this movie. If the White House could just see the movie, we knew Joe Biden would do something. We knew
and maybe Heidi, just say a bit, which I failed to do. Maybe just give a brief description of Invisible War for those who haven't seen it.
Yeah, absolutely. So The Invisible War is a documentary film that exposes the epidemic of military sexual assault within the United States military. It went on to become nominated for an Oscar. and has, members of Congress themselves have said that it's been a catalyst for over 35 pieces of legislation that have worked to improve, the status of how sexual assault is addressed and handled for survivors within the military. So we're working closely early on, and we wanted the White House to see the film. And I remember calling Amy and sending this big email saying, I heard back. The perfect person in the White House said she's going to watch the film. I need to get her a DVD ASAP. And Amy was like, okay, great. Here's the DVD. So when are they screening this? I was like, wait a minute. No, we just got them to watch it. This is a big success. And I say all that to say, I think what it really takes to move the needle is that sort of what's next attitude. And that's something that comes directly from the filmmaker, it comes from you, and also putting a team in place who can sort of, you say jump, I say how high. So there's that. I also think, sort of more practically and tangibly speaking, very early on when we're looking that it takes knowing where your pressure point is from a cultural and a political perspective. And, very early on when we started working together, I have a map that we created that literally said, okay, here are the decision makers who affect political change, and here's how we're going to go after them, and here are the executive producers that already have relationships with these people. And guess what? The people who affect culture change, boots on the ground, they're a totally different set of people. The two don't even talk to each other, really. So to get to those people, there's an entirely different strategy. And then I know that one thing, and that's culture change within the military that I'm speaking about specifically. And then when it comes to broader sort of pop culture change, when The Invisible War had been nominated for an Oscar, Amy Ziering literally went to every contact she had in Hollywood to watch that movie. And as a result, I think at some point somebody had given Beau Willimon, the creator of House of Cards, the screener to watch. And Beau Willimon said himself that as a result of seeing The Invisible War, he decided to write a military sexual assault storyline into the plot of season 2. So I think those are a couple of sort of, attitudinal things that it takes to make impact, but also a couple of tangible targeting things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Lauren, let me turn it over to you. So American Experience has 2 films in the AFI Docs Festival this year, Last Days of Vietnam and Freedom Summer. Do you want to talk to us about some of the engagement work that you're doing around those 2 films?
Sure, we are very lucky to have 2 films in the festival. Actually, we keep saying these films are following each other around. They both premiered at Sundance in January and have been doing the festival circuit over the course of the spring and summer. Freedom Summer will air, I can just give a shameless plug, on PBS on Tuesday night. It will premiere. It's the latest film from Stanley Nelson. It's an incredible film. It looks at 1964, the volunteers in Mississippi, both local and the volunteers who went down to Mississippi to register voters, to open freedom schools, and to try to gain greater recognition at the national convention, presidential national convention, Democratic. And it's an incredible film. And then Last Days in Vietnam is a film by Rory Kennedy, and it looks at, when we say Last Days in Vietnam, we contemplated even calling it Last Hours in Vietnam. It really looks at the last 48 hours in Vietnam and the evacuation that really was a makeshift evacuation that got out over 100,000 people in the course of about 48 hours as Saigon fell to the North Vietnamese. And both films, I think what's incredible about them is they are just unbelievably relevant today. We don't, at American Experience, necessarily set out to say, okay, what's the most relevant topic today? And a lot of times when these films go into production, we don't even realize how relevant they're going to be. We didn't know that as this film, as Last Days in Vietnam, was premiering here at AFI Docs, that this story would be playing out in Iraq today. I mean, the number of people who have already connected the dots between what is happening in Iraq today and what happened in Saigon in 1975 is incredible. So I think from the point of view of just relevancy of the films, and then when we're talking about engagement, that's something that's really important to look at. We take a lot of the same tactics that have been talked about up on this up on this panel today about, activating the people who are involved in the film, the partners who are most invested in the film. And, with Freedom Summer, there were over 700 volunteers who went to Mississippi that summer. We've done a geographic audit. Where are all of these people? How do we activate these people? How do we get in touch with them? How do we make them aware of the film? And also make them, even if they're not in the film, spokespeople for both the film and the topic in general. Both of these films also will be airing on anniversaries. This is the 50th anniversary of Freedom Summer. And when Last Days in Vietnam comes to PBS next April, that will be the 40th anniversary of the fall of Saigon. So I think looking at all of those angles for engagement, not just who is involved and who cares about this issue, but then also looking where is this most relevant right now? Where do we see in American experience? We're obviously historical documentaries. So connecting the dots for people, we always love to say, no, people will make the connections. They'll jump to that conclusion. And it's like, let's just spell it out for them, and, we're not standing up there saying, the script from Saigon is absolutely playing out in Vietnam, in Iraq today. That's not what we're saying. But to say, this stands as a cautionary tale of how do you end a protracted war? What is owed to the people of a country that you leave? To raise those questions without saying that we know all the answers, but to say that we have these tools in hand with Freedom Summer. Let's talk about voting rights. Here's a perfect tool to educate people so that you have the background, know the history, and obviously voting rights today is as much in the news as it was in 1964. So. Do you want to take a look at Sure. What we have up here is the trailer for Last Days in Vietnam. So if you have a chance, it will screen tomorrow morning, and Rory Kennedy will join via Skype. And then we don't have a clip from Freedom Summer, but that will screen on Sunday, and Stanley Nelson will be there for the Q&A as well. So I recommend both.
Actually, Tamara, it's in, unless I want to flip the slides, that's the last clip.
Oh, okay. Well, so we'll wait. We'll take a look.
Well, wait. It's a cliffhanger. You'll all see it in a bit.
Great, thank you so much. So Chi, let's go over to you. And so ITVS has been involved, obviously, in supporting many of the films that are here on the panel and many of the engagement initiatives. And Chi's work has really been, just doing tremendous work on engagement, both for American Graduate, for Women and Girls Lead, and for Diverse Muslim Voices. Chi, if you want to just highlight some of the work that you and ITVS have been doing around the engagement initiatives, and also talk about community cinema. Let me turn it over to you.
Sure. So I think before I can talk about the thematic campaigns that Tamara just mentioned, I want to step back and give you background on community cinema, which I think is a program that really helped to build the pathway for organizations like ITVS and CPB and others to take on the mantle of bundling content and presenting it in a longitudinal way to audiences and to partners across the country. So how many of you are familiar with community cinema? Raise of hands. Okay, a good amount. So for those of you who aren't, Community Cinema is a program that we launched about 2005, so nearly 10 years ago, to provide independent lens content, which is our series on PBS, a catalyst for starting conversations in partnership with public television stations and community organizations across the country. And we were able to, through that ongoing series, build partnerships that carried over year after year. So, in our programming, we would often have films that dealt with the environment, that dealt with gender equity, that dealt with disability rights issues. And from that experience, we saw that there was a hunger for organizations that we worked with year after year to continue a pipeline of content to support their work. All these news stories help to build human bridges and understanding and empathy for the work that they do on the ground. It goes beyond the news bites and the headlines and really helps people to connect in a very human way to the stories. And so fast forward about 5 years ago, in partnership with CPB, we thought, what can we do to deepen our impact around the work that we're doing on the ground with the Community Cinema program, year after year, season after season with Independent Lens. And we decided to launch a series of thematic campaigns where we bundle content and tie that to our broadcast and our community engagement strategies. And so the first of those campaigns was Women and Girls Lead. And we're entering into our 5th year this year. With this initiative, we have developed a pipeline in partnership with independent filmmakers across the country of 50 films that have come to broadcast and online audiences in the past 4 years. We have leveraged partnerships across sectors. So I think a lot of the work that you've been hearing today is about what Rich talked about in terms of facilitation, in terms of what Eliza and Felicia talked about in terms of providing resources. And I really look at what we do as capacity building. I know all of you are experts in the issues and what you work on. You're expert filmmakers, you're expert conveners, you're expert communicators. But what we can do is provide a toolkit of resources to help the people on the ground who are on the front lines use your stories effectively. And I think that's what all of us have been talking about today. And so that's one of the innovative things that I think we're all doing and that we've tried to really push forward with campaigns like Women and Girls Lead. One of the things that I want to talk to you about today is the American Graduate Campaign and how we've been supporting CPB around those efforts. And we have a film that broadcast last fall called The Graduates by Bernardo Ruiz. And I have to say that it was one of the most meaningful engagement campaigns that I've had a chance to work on in my career in public media and community organizing in general. The film looks at the dropout crisis in Latino communities, and I think provided a really important service to public media and to our communities, and that I think it provided diversity and representation to the conversations that were happening nationally around the dropout crisis in the United States. So before I dive into the examples, I'm going to ask Michonne to roll the clip if that's possible.
Chastity.
No. Can we fast forward to? Sorry. Yeah.
One of the reasons why Latino youth drop out is because they want to go to work to help their household, to make sure that their parents and their siblings are getting the bills paid. That young person has had that sense of responsibility among their household long before they turn 18.
I live with my mom and my 3 brothers, and we all live at the Nelson Family Residence. It's a homeless shelter in the Bronx. For junior year, like, I struggled a lot. In February of that year, my family became homeless, and like that really brought me down. I never told any of the teachers my problems, but I was acting weird, and my teachers kind of knew it. I was thinking at the time, like, school will help me not think about it, so I'm gonna go every day, do my work, and not focus on it. But when you're writing or when you're reading, it was like I was thinking about that. So it bothered me a lot.
So as I was mentioning, The Graduates is part of American Graduate, and it was also a featured program in our community cinema program. And what I forgot to mention is that community cinema is a national screening series that, when in 2005 we started in 8 cities, but is now in over 100 communities across the country. And we've used the community cinema program as a key lever for the work that we do around our thematic content campaigns because of the reach and the networks that we built across the country through the many years that we've been running this program. And so with The Graduates, alongside the usual resources that you've heard us all talk about in terms of discussion guides and screeners, what we try to do is to put this content and the resources directly into the hands of community organizers and people working on the front lines of education issues, so school administrators, community organizations, educational institutions. And something that some of you may want to consider is, what are some flexible ways that you can put your content out there and make it widely accessible to organizations who may not have the money to, pay for an institutional rental for public exhibition, or an after-school program who may not have access to the kind of resources that would allow them to purchase a DVD screener from you. And the filmmaker that we partnered with on this campaign was incredibly generous and actually gave us 10 years of streaming and public exhibition rights to allow us to produce a series of toolkits that we are able to put directly into the hands of our community members. So we distributed about 2,000 of these DVD toolkits and included the entire film. It included 15-minute modules that we developed to support community conversations. So short content, you've been hearing a lot of us talk about this, and they're really important tools to foster conversation and really hone in on specific issues that your community wants to focus on. And so we focused on each specific character in the film and the issues that they were dealing with for these 15-minute modules. We created a youth action guide that provided sample activities for youth to actually take charge and work in partnership with adult mentors and educators in their communities to address issues that would help to increase opportunities for educational attainment. And a discussion guide, of course. And as I mentioned before, this campaign was really meant to target Latino families and communities and the people that serve them across the country. So everything was translated in bilingual. We translated the discussion guide. The screeners were Spanish audio with English subtitles. We translated a social media messaging, our evaluation surveys. So everything was, we really wanted to ensure that things were culturally appropriate and that we were going to get the kind of response and interaction that we wanted from the community.
Great, thank you so much. Gee, so Rich, while we have you still, what for you, is really resonating? Can you talk, in terms of what you're hearing, what really worked for you? And Chi, maybe you can pass Rich the microphone.
Obviously, Women and Girls Lead, when ITVS announced that as a long-term commitment, now the station knows it, if you will, please, I don't want to sound casual at all, we're going to be in that business, if you will, for a long time. American Graduate was the same sort of effort. We just got a second grad on American Graduate. So when we've got 6 years to work on this project, or 5 years to work on the project, again, don't want to sound casual at all, but now when you call the University of Michigan, Wayne State, Michigan State, and say, can we talk to your women's studies group, or your international women's group, or international students group, when you start to talk to interfaith communities, when you start to talk to young women's groups, again, not strictly women, but when you talk to folks who are going to be interested in the topic, we're going to be here. Now we have partners. So we can show half the sky, talk about some issues, and say, when we meet again in November, that's, I think, how you really build community. And that's where, at least for us, there's 5 key issues at the station: kids, culture, leadership, energy, environment, and health. And the reason I can say them so fast is because that is the standard in our building. Know where those issues are. Same thing with the American Graduate. If we're going to be in the let's change the title on the dropout issue in America, if you know you're going to be into a long term, now it makes sense to really invite the community into it. So to me, that's critical, and that's a critical change for public television. This is a system that was built on shows, if you will, and they're great shows. American Experience, great show. Stations can bring together the American Experience as an issue if they're interested in history, context, resolving conflict, bringing understanding to history. The shows are critical. Great docs are critical, but they really need, if we're doing our job, we're saying, oh my God, thank God there was the doc on kids aging out in autism. The kids aging out of high school, autistic kids. Oh my God. So here's a really great example. If anyone in your family is challenged with autism, it is a life-defining thing. If your kid is ADD, it's a challenge. If your kid is autistic, it is a big challenge. We have a personal friend, severely autistic kid. And so along comes this documentary. It is about kids who are leaving high school. They now have no support system. Mom and dad, you have a very challenged kid now the entire day, no professional help, right? And so that's a documentary that people are going to, it's the 2 handshake kind of documentary where the mom is looking at you and she's holding both your hands. Somebody finally told Ben's story, literally. And so that documentary, it is not easy, but it is not that hard to turn to the community and say, who's interested in this topic? Obviously, healthcare professionals, there's a huge network of autistic parents, parents of autistic kids. But those are the kinds of mindsets that's where we need to get to. And with their support, we get a little further down the road, try and get it solved.
Thank you, Rich. So my understanding from what you're saying for you in the room is that the more you see where your work fits in, the more helpful it is to get this system to work with you, and the more you let us know who your partners are, who you've built all these relationships with in the course of filming. it helps us, sort of jumpstart the kind of campaign around your film that we all want to see. So Heidi, let me go back to you. When and how, let's say filmmakers are in this room going, I have the kind of film that, we're seeing up here. How do you want them to get in touch with you? How do you want them to let you know about their film?
Call, tweet, email. Can you say a little more specifically, like what they should come prepared with?
Exactly. How do you choose which films you're going to take up?
Yeah, great question. We in our firm specifically, we want to make sure that the person driving the impact campaign and the day-to-day work and sort of managing the execution and building the strategy of the projects that we work on, it's really important to us that that the person running that so fully believes in the issue. And one of the things I think I learned early on in my career is that while I think money is important and money makes the world go round, and we definitely live in a capitalist society, and all of that good stuff to do with money, that's not what motivates me in my day-to-day. So I learned very early on in my career that I need to be working on things every day that I would get out of bed for, whether I was getting paid or not. And it just so turns out I get to get paid and do this great work. Yay. But the larger point is, we definitely look for things that are personal. I'm going to beat the drum for this, because the truth is, you get a lot of no's down the way. It's, it's no walk in the park to make impact. And so you want to know that the people working with you, or if I were a filmmaker, I would want to know that the people working with me were equally as committed to the outcome as I was. So that's sort of how we choose. And then staffing and all of that.
And then specifically, so sort of from the big, what do you want filmmakers to show you? What do you want them to come to you with? A finished film, an early film? When do you want them to come to you? And with what?
That's a great question. I've worked on both sides of it, right? Where I really haven't seen the film, and I'm working on something right now where I haven't seen the film yet, but have worked with the filmmakers before and have a level of trust and a sort of sense of what their film will be like. But definitely some piece of content, right? They came to me and said, here's a clip to watch, so I could get a sense of what it was going to be like. Also, when people come to the table and say, I don't know how I'm going to get there, that's okay. It's not your job to know how you're going to get there, but here is what I want to see at the end of it. If I had a magic wand, here is what I want to create. That is really valuable. So definitely think that through a little bit before you come to the table, and I'm sure all of you would, because there's a fiscal responsibility there too, so you'd have a sense of what it is that you want to create.
Great, thank you. And so Lauren, let me come back to you. American Experience has done some really deep and amazing work with educators and really plugging into schools and standards-based learning. Can you talk with us about how that works and how you choose the films that are going to really work in the classroom?
Sure, and I think educators is obviously a huge audience for many, many documentaries. I think particularly with us, as we're historical documentaries, there's a huge need among teachers to have resources and have media that they can share with students, because I think it is so engaging. That is so true, I think, particularly with a lot of our documentaries that are witness driven, and where people are able to say, that person that I'm looking at on screen, they really lived this. This was their life. Students, I think, engage with that a lot more. So we work closely with WGBH Education and with PBS Learning Media, who, if you have a film that airs, and obviously I know I'm in a unique position that American Experience already has this distribution, that we have the PBS platform, and all of our films get that kind of national distribution, and we are able to work with those entities. But what they can do is take our film and break it down into pieces and break it down into smaller modules and say, this will really work in a classroom, and how do we create assets around these individual pieces, and how do we make sure they're standards based, and how do we make sure that when we're watching the film and then when we're going to PBS Learning Media and WGBH Education, that we're helping them to identify what are those films that we feel like are really sticky, for lack of a better word. We're more entrenched in these films than they are. They get them kind of when they're final products. So what we're able to say to them is, here's what we've seen work. And we think both about education in formal and informal settings, and I think that's something that's really important. I think teachers are really, really challenged today to try to get in as much content as they would like to, and we know that a lot of that learning happens in more informal settings, whether that's community centers, museums, libraries, universities, outside of the classroom. And so I think what we try to do is take our films and also break them up into many pieces. What we did with Freedom Riders in 2011, what we're doing with Freedom Summer, and what we'll do with Last Days in Vietnam is create kits that have, here's the 5-minute clip, here's the 10-minute clip, here's the 20-minute clip, here's the 1 hour. And it sounds kind of silly, but if you don't do these work for people, these people are incredibly busy. People who run community organizations, educational organizations, they don't have a lot of time and they don't have a lot of resources. And these are things that for us, we can do one time and then scale. You know, we can reproduce that. We can create 1,000 copies of those DVDs and send them out to people and say, not only are these the clips, but we've also framed them for you. Here's your setup. Here's how you need to set up this clip. And here are 5 questions to get you started in your community after that. And work with people who are experts in that matter. You know, with Last Days in Vietnam, we're very aware that we know what we don't know. You know, we are not experts right now in the Vietnamese American community, so we're bringing on people who are experts in that, so that when we send out those clips and when we send out those materials, we make sure it is all culturally sensitive and all, you know, accurately pointed towards the right audiences. So I think that's one thing, both for teachers and then also in informal settings. We need to make this easy for people and need to make it really turnkey for them, because they don't have the resources to do it, even though they're very eager and they really want to. So that's one of the things that we try to do to make our content accessible in classrooms and other settings.
So the takeaway there is not only are the people who run the organizations busy and need a turnkey solution, but audiences. People are busy, right? So people are looking for content where they want to find it, which leads me, I'm moderating, so I won't speak too much as a panelist, but I will say that from your end, you need to make sure that the rights that you have available, depending on who you are distributing with and who's doing your educational distribution, that you have the ability to do this kind of work, because there's nothing more heartbreaking than a filmmaker who wants to go out and make all their content available, but then they've given away those rights and no longer have them. So you need to really be clear about your plans for the film, and then make sure that you're in partnership with the people that you're selling your film to for different kinds of distribution, that you're all on the same page with what's going to happen. And I just say this from experience. But before we have more to go, but Chi, I would love, a campaign that you ran called Map Your World was, really plugged into the kind of transmedia strategy that we heard from Felicia on the first part of the panel, that really tied into a long-form documentary called The Revolutionary Optimist. Do you want to just describe that to us?
Just going to give forewarning to Michonne that we're going back again in the clip order. Yes, Map Your World, as Tamara mentioned, was inspired by a documentary that we broadcast last spring called The Revolutionary Optimists. And it was a really exciting transmedia project to work on. And I love this example because it shows how if you plan ahead thoughtfully, then you can figure out what are the different kinds of contents and assets that I can create to support a wide range of engagement around a film. And so Map Your World is an online platform that empowers young people to use mapping tools to document, analyze, and come up with suggested recommendations around issues, around social issues, and health in their local communities. So Michonne, is the clip ready? I'm going to show that to you now.
আমাদের সবচেয়ে বড় সমস্যা হলো পানীয় জল।
Do you have a transit pass issued by the school? Oh no, I'll walk to school. Have you been a victim of violent crime?
It's not good for the environment. Yeah, birds can eat it. And animals can die because of them.
ম্যাপিয়ার ওয়ার্ল্ড প্রজেক্টটা পুরো মানে ওয়ার্ল্ডেই চলছে। তো আমি জলের সার্ভে করব, কোনটাতে হলুদ জল পড়ে বা কোনটাতে লাল জল পড়ে। আর এটা আমি মোবাইলে করছি, কারণ এইটা মোবাইলে করলে আমার ডাইরেক্ট ইন্টারনেটে চলে যাবে। বেশি পড়ে হলুদ জল পড়ে, বিশাল হলুদ। ও বাবা।
So these red dots are the different places where we collected data, and they show up on the map.
Eventually, we started making graphs of all our data, and I think the most we ever found was at 843 at the fountain.
We want to get a picture of where incidents of violence happen and where students have been targeted.
With the data, we're trying to find out how far students live away from the school and if they've been a victim of crime getting to school.
Probably people doubt us because we're children, but when we have all of that evidence of what is actually happening, it's probably going to help a lot. The revolutionary optimists, Salim Shika and the whole team in India, they've really inspired us.
We really saw kids developing their identity when we were out there gathering signatures for the petition. The Map Your World project allows you to take the project where the kids are going, so you provide them some guidance and then follow them and see where they take it.
What are your guys' favorite subjects?
My favorite subject is history.
Can you sing a song for us? আমরা কিছুদিন আগে স্কাইপে কথা বলেছিলাম ম্যাপিয়ার ওয়ার্ল্ড সম্পর্কে, তার মানে যারা করছে আমাদের মতো। তো এটা একটা নিজের মধ্যে কি হয়, যখন লোককে আমি কাজ করতে দেখি নিজের মধ্যে একটা মানে সাহস থাকে বা একটা বিশ্বাস থাকে না আমিও পারবো।
So that was one of the classrooms you saw there was a third grade classroom. We actually designed the platform, the curriculum to target middle schools and high schoolers, but it just shows the beauty of our resources, that they can be scaffolded up or down for a variety of communities. And as you can see, it's a really sophisticated program that these youth are participating in. And what I love again about this project is that we are able to incorporate this into our on-the-ground engagement with community cinema. And a lot of times it's a real bummer when filmmakers are working on interactive projects and they're not ready for 6 months or a year until after the broadcast has happened. And it's the case for this film, but we knew that it was in development, and we were able to plan ahead for that and include demos and information about Map Your World at some of our community cinema events, so that through that process, we were able to recruit beta testers, schools and youth organizations who were able to pilot projects and give feedback to the filmmakers and the producers of the Map Your World project on how to refine the platform, create the tools so that they were easy to use for the students and the teachers, and the curriculum in a way that was, made sense for the educators to use in the classroom. So one of the really remarkable stories that came out of our engagement through community cinema and combining it with the Map Your World digital platform is a public health student who had attended a screening in Hawaii, decided after he saw the film and the Map Your World platform that he wanted to dedicate his summer fellowship in the Philippines to a project with youth in a rural community that was a resettlement area for typhoon victims. And through that project, he trained a group of youth leaders who he called star leaders, I think, to survey and interview about 3,000 households in that community. It was the first time that they were able to do a real rigorous assessment of what the needs were for this marginalized community that was trying to recover from a horrible tragedy. And I want to read to you something that the filmmaker wrote about this, because I can't summarize it as good as she has. The youth expressed that the process of meeting and conversing with so many of their neighbors changed their narrative from one of personal tragedy to one of empathy and community. They had not been aware that so many people were going hungry, that so many children were left by work-seeking parents, or that child mortality was so high, and this knowledge weighed heavily on them. But they found that knowledge and empathy are important steps on the path to action, noting that very few families had community gardens, for instance. They planned to start a community garden project. And Chad, who is the public health student that led this project, was deeply impressed one day to hear that in surveying a family, an instance of elder abuse was described, and the youth had taken it upon themselves to inform the authorities. Said one student, "As youth leaders, our team can be the voice of the people. We want to restore the dignity that has been stolen from us." The youth presented the results of their project at a meeting that included the heads of major foundations working in the area, as well as the mayor of the district. They wrote passionate letters to the power brokers in attendance, describing what they had learned about the needs of their community, and gave each person an envelope containing the letters. And they're very hopeful that the stories that they presented will make a difference. In the meantime, they feel a sense of urgency to continue the work and to help it spread. Michael, who is one of the star leaders, had been hired to conduct a 3-day training at the Consuelo Foundation headquarters in Manila on the Map Your World technology and the methodology of the project so that they can initiate and replicate the same project in other parts of Manila and the Philippines, which I think is so exciting. So our next steps with the initiative are that they're fine-tuning the platform right now. You can look at it in its preview form at mapyourworld.org/MYW, and it'll launch in the fall. And the filmmakers actually had a donation from Google of 2,000 Android tablets, so they had ongoing conversations with them about this technology and wanting to help underserved communities with this program. And so we're partnering with them to leverage our partners through community cinema, through our campaigns, to find teachers and youth organizations who can really use this to empower young people to be agents of change in their community. Lauren mentioned PBS Learning Media earlier, so the curriculum that we produce in partnership with the filmmakers will be posted on PBS Learning Media. They have 1.4 million registered users, and so again, it's an amazing network. If you're able to partner with a PBS station or a strand to get your content up there, it's an amazing audience to reach. So we're going to be getting those tablets out there, and I hope you can just sit there and imagine what if projects like that were happening all across the U.S. and around the globe, as what I described in the Philippines. I think it's really inspiring what you can do with this transmedia and multi-platform engagement that we're all working on.
Oh, Chi, thank you so much. Now, I'm aware of the clock, and I'm aware that we really want to bring you guys into this conversation. So what I'd love to do is invite Felicia and Eliza to come back up and join us up front. And if we have time, there's 2 more clips that we really want to show you, but I'm going to hold those to the end so that we can see those. We have Invisible War, which we actually can show you, and also Freedom Summer. So we want, Last Days of Vietnam, which we're going to look at if we have time. But let's start here. And so I want you guys to be thinking of your questions. Mishan, do we need to mic the audiences for our online? Oh, great. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. And we already have a gentleman in the back. So how do you want him to do it in the back? Mishan, can he just stand and say your question? Yeah, I'll repeat your question if, yeah. I can repeat it.
Okay.
Oh,
well, this whole panel is fantastic, and it makes me feel like a revolutionary optimist because it's so terrific that you're working at this grassroots level to make. It's not just film. It's not something that comes at people. It's all of us coming together using the medium of film to actually begin to create the world we choose. And I especially love the incredible part that's people around the world. It wasn't just in the U.S. It's the people in these small villages using these tools to begin to empower themselves. It gives me hope for humanity that it's not just a top-down world where we have to wait for governments to do it, that we the people can do it. So this is very empowering, and I guess the key question is how can we begin to make that more global? So, I mean, yes, for instance, it's the American experience, but it's really a global community. We're coming together as one globe.
Thanks for your question. Does anybody want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I think is really important, especially when you're bringing the globe together, is social media. And I think having an understanding of what different platforms most of the world or different countries use. Instagram is a newer platform, but 70% of the user base is outside of the United States. And I think that, that's how people are connecting now. You get information. There's a 1-minute news cycle. People self-select what information they connect with and what actions they take based on what their communities are doing. And I think that is a really sort of cheap and effective way to engage the world in conversations.
And I'll just mention, with Women and Girls Lead, which you heard a bit about earlier from Chi, with 50 documentaries in the U.S. about women and girls. Last year, we were so fortunate to be able to launch Women and Girls Lead Global, which is a partnership with USAID, Ford Foundation, and CARE. And we're broadcasting 30 films, so not all of the 50, but 30 of the films about Women and Girls Lead in 9 countries. And we're doing on-the-ground screenings and opportunities for communities in I don't think I can say all 9 countries, but we're in Kenya, Colombia, Bangladesh, Jordan, and several other countries, really trying to delve into these issues and allow people to use the films as catalysts for the kinds of conversations that film can allow. So those are some examples of global efforts. Other questions? Yes. And I can repeat your question. Yes, please. And I won't embarrass you by saying that you're Michonne's sister. Great. So I hope everyone heard the question. How does culture inform the engagement strategies? Chi, do you want to speak to that? You do this so amazingly well.
Oh, goodness, thank you. Well, I think our rule is don't look at partnership shopping as one-stop shopping. Don't, look at one organization as the sole solution for all your expertise and the community networks that you need to build. Before we enter into a relationship with anyone, we do vetting, we do research, we talk to lots of community leaders to get a sense of what the community politics are, to really understand the territory that we're setting our fits into. I'm ready to admit that I'm not an expert in any given issue that's thrown at me with these films, and so it's really up to us to do our homework and to understand the political context that we're working within, and working with a variety of partners that represent different viewpoints, and being the best facilitator and bridge builder that you can be, both between yourselves and those partners. But a lot of the work that I see that we accomplish is bringing partners together in new ways before. So some of our screening events, some of the work that we do at the national level, we see these organizations come together in new ways because they haven't had the opportunity to sit down at the table before. And it's, probably for a variety of reasons, but I think that's what's really powerful about public media and the work that we all do as media producers and presenters is trying to build those bridges, approaching the work with a really open mind, and treating it as an iterative process. So if you think your work is done, it's not done. Keep asking questions and pay attention to questions that people are asking you because they're very informative.
I would also add, for one of my rules of engagement is never make assumptions. And one of the ways not to make assumptions is actually bring the community into that process. So for instance, I was working on a campaign that was aimed at historically Black colleges and universities, which may seem that you have a sort of consensus. We quickly found out that we do not. Howard is very different than a Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. So we actually had to bring the students on as part of the process of developing the engagement campaign, and then made sure that they were the face of that campaign. So not only, often what we do is we make people the faces, but we design for and not with. So it's very important for us to design with the students.
Yeah, and is that okay if I just
go
add to
ahead
that? And at POV, it's very much an understanding that our partners know their communities far better than we do. So we provide them with the resources, but they have to come to us, fill out an event. They have something in mind so that they have full ownership over the event and how they're using it for their community.
Sure, and I think a lot of this reiterates what some of my fellow panelists are saying. For instance, with Last Days in Vietnam, I think that is one area. Working for American Experience, which is an anthology series, obviously we go from topic to topic. So we do very deep dives on many of our films, particularly ones that we're going to blow out, like Last Days in Vietnam, like we did with Freedom Summer and Freedom Riders. But with Last Days in Vietnam, I think one of the things that we realize is the experience of the Vietnamese American immigrant is very, very different. You have people who got out before April of 1975. You have people who got out in those very last days of April of 1975. And you have people who did not get out until the early 80s and even later. And the experience of those people and their relationship with the former and current government in Vietnam and their relationship with the U.S. and how they see the U.S. is very, very different. So we are going to work closely with the Center for Asian American Media, which has a much broader understanding of these issues, and then also work closely with Vietnamese American advisors to help us to navigate those waters. And I think it's very, very important because you can do 100 things right and you can do one thing really wrong and derail an entire campaign, and that becomes a headline. I think you've seen that with documentaries, with engagement campaigns in many instances. So you just have to be very, very careful about what you're doing. And I think it's an important question and important to weigh for each of these films.
That's a great point. We are getting towards the end, and so with your permission, unless anybody has a burning question, what I thought we could do is just go down the line and just, a final takeaway or one piece of advice that you have for this audience. And we can start maybe, Eliza, with your end if you're feeling fresh, or we can start down here with Lauren. All right. And let's just pass it. Don't overthink it, but what you've heard today that you think is really worth repeating. And sharing with this group as far as something you want them to be thinking of as a good piece of advice.
Sure. I think what kind of sums up what a lot of people have been saying is to really bring people into the process and include people in your planning and in your outreach, whether those are community partners, whether those are PBS stations. There's such a diversity of experience across the whole country and internationally. And for anyone, even the people who made the film who know that topic very, very well, nobody is as much of an expert in their community as the people who are actually on the ground in those communities. So I think what's really most important, and it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, and that's why, it takes teams and it takes funding. We're really grateful to our funders who support this work, because I think having the luxury of funding and having the luxury of time, and then just people who are very, very dedicated and willing to put in more than 40 hours a week is what really makes these projects a success. And, we have the luxury of time with Last Days in Vietnam. We had it with Freedom Riders. From the Sundance premiere to the ultimate PBS broadcast is about 16 to 18 months on each of them. And there's no greater luxury than that time to really plan and to do things right. So to the extent, and people don't always have that luxury, but to the extent that you can plan as far in advance as possible and really bring in the partners and the expertise that are on the ground in various communities, I'd recommend that you do so.
I think it's really important you know what business you're in. Are you a storyteller? Are you a documentarian? Are you trying to solve a problem? Are you trying to drive understanding? Are you trying to advocate for something? They're all slightly different, but the differences can be critical. We had a long presentation recently from someone who suggested a series on entrepreneurship in Detroit, and lots of rationale for why this was an important series, how he would build it, what all the important issues with. And then he explained that he would also be the host of the series. And we quickly came to understand that there were other agendas. So what are you really trying to get done, and what other, trying to solve the problem and building a business, I wouldn't add much to that. The length of your agenda becomes really critical, but if you're trying to just drive understanding and you hope to make that a sustainable business, maybe that works. But think a lot about what your intentionality is, because it really affects you when someone says, it's not an hour, but it's 5 great pieces. And if your heart falls out of that, you're in a different business than the person who says, I just want to tell those 5 stories.
To piggyback on what Rich said, I think that's so great. In addition to knowing your business, I would say know who it is that you're trying to reach. Know your target audience. And I think as people who care about making a difference, we get so caught up in I want everybody to see this. I want to be everything for everybody. And the truth is we live in a world with limited budgets, limited staff time, and just limited timelines in general. And when you really make impact, it's because you've saturated something. Enough people have heard of you enough times, and then they're taking action based on what they heard you say. So instead of saying I want to reach the middle-aged mom and the daughter and the 35-year-old mommy blogger and all of these people, really think through I'm going to saturate and impact this one community and then build out.
I was going to say something very similar, but great minds on this panel. And actually that just leads me to reference what Eliza said earlier, is in that, where we're at today is very different than where we were at 8, 10, 13 years ago. And I think that you all are so fortunate that for every one of us, there are many more other organizations, consulting agencies, public media strands like POV and Independent Lens. So there's so many resources out there for you to support you and partner with you in your work. So don't feel like you're alone. And I think we're all here to give you advice and guidance on where to go for support for your campaigns. And then just to build on what you said, if you're clear about your goals and you're not going to try and spread yourself too thin with setting 20 goals that you want to accomplish, be clear about how you're going to support your partners in achieving that, because not everybody has, once you give them the plan, they might not know how to implement it. And so something that we do in this work is, really personalizing and coaching and mentoring the people that we work with to implement plans effectively, to think about the goals that they're setting at a very local level and what are the activities that you need to accomplish to achieve those goals. So don't take the build it and they will come mentality, build it with them, and stay there to evaluate, is this structure sound for us to continue to live here and do this work together.
And jumping off of that, it's rarely never too early to begin building audience. And that could be in many different ways. So if maybe you're blogging about the issue, maybe you have a weekly Twitter chat about the issue, whatever the case is, I'm sure somebody could pinpoint a situation where it's too early, but I always encourage filmmakers and artists and creatives to build audience. And if that makes you feel uncomfortable, think about it as connecting. Think about it as, being part of the community. But there is value in that. And being able to go to, a distributor or go to a producing partner or whatever the case is with a built-in audience, there's value there.
So I think I'm just going to echo and reiterate, which is start early and don't do it alone. There's so many partners, there's so many people out there that are going to be interested in working with you on these films, particularly if it's great storytelling. So as soon as you have a trailer, bring people in.
Thank you. Let me just thank this amazing panel. Really, we are so fortunate to have these minds with us today.
You had one question come in over social media.
Oh, great. Please.
Tags on what Felicia was just talking about.
Oh, great.
Once you have people engaged, what do you recommend in terms of trying to keep that engagement for a longer period of time?
Great question.
I would say, this is a pitfall that people fall into. Hello. It's like, I got there. A lot of times I'll hear filmmakers say, can we just go on hiatus for a few months? Sure, you can go on hiatus for a few months, but don't expect that person who's signed up for your email campaign or that person who's following you on Twitter to be all on board when you get off of hiatus in 3 months. It's just like dating. If somebody's chasing you and then they don't call for 3 months and then they're like, hey, let's hook up, you're probably going to be a no. So you want to keep that in mind with your supporters. That's your base, and give them opportunities to take action and move them up that ladder of engagement.
Yeah, I would look at it as narrative, right? So what is this longer story that you're telling, and how can you continuously move them along this story? And as storytellers, it might help you to be able to think in those terms.
So terrific. So we really do have to close. I want to thank our online audience. I want to thank our in-house audience. And mostly I want to thank our wonderful panel. Thank you so much for all of your insights. If we can hand the microphone over to Mishan, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, who's been handling all of our, to describe where to go for the breakout sessions.
Okay,
Mishan.
I'd like everybody, I want to thank Tamara for a great moderation. Sorry, did I hit you with the pen, the Sharpie? Sorry about that, Heidi. We're going to go into breakout sessions. They're going to start at 3, so that's shortly. And so pay attention, take out your pens, and listen carefully.